High in the quiet Colorado mountains, a former Marine named Logan returns to an old wooden cabin left behind by his late aunt. The cabin stands alone between tall pine trees, its windows dark, its porch covered in dust, untouched for years. With his loyal German shepherd, Shadow, walking beside him, Logan steps inside and immediately senses something wrong. The floorboards are uneven, a single map hangs crooked on the wall, and under the loose planks, a small blue vial glows softly in the dark. When Logan discovers a hidden mining tunnel in the forest and armed men watching him from the tree line, he realizes his aunt didn't die naturally. She was silenced for what she uncovered. But in the middle of the danger, Logan feels a quiet strength guiding him. A reminder that God's protection doesn't always come as miracles in the sky. Sometimes it comes as courage, loyalty, and the will to stand for the truth. If you believe faith still lights the way for the brave, don't scroll. Hit subscribe, share, and comment Amen to help spread this story of justice and God's guidance. May the Lord bless everyone watching. The outskirts of Durango, Colorado, were never meant for comfort. In late autumn, the wind crawled down from the San Juan Mountains like a living thing, cold enough to slip through the seams of any coat, sharp enough to remind a man that nature always had the final word. The rain wasn't heavy, but persistent, a fine, icy drizzle that coated the gravel roads in thin silver and turned the pines into dark, swaying silhouettes under the dull glow of street lamps. Beyond the last row of rusted mailboxes and weather-worn pickup trucks sat a cluster of cabins rented mostly by loners, seasonal workers, or people running from some version of themselves. Logan Miller fit all three categories. Logan was 38, tall with the kind of shoulders that made even large jackets look fitted. His face was the type carved by war, strong jaw, cheekbones defined, a faint scar crossing the edge of his brow like a pale thread. His eyes, a muted steel blue, were alert even when he was still. The Marine Corps had sharpened him, but life after discharge had ground him down. He carried himself in a way that suggested he expected trouble at any moment, and experience had taught him that expecting trouble usually meant surviving it. Logan lived alone by choice, or at least that was what he told people when they rarely asked. In truth, isolation was the only place quiet enough to drown the echoes of deployment, the ones that woke him in the middle of the night, gasping like he was still under enemy fire. His only real companion was Shadow, a 6-year-old German shepherd with a thick black and tan coat, sharp amber eyes, and a sturdy build that spoke of disciplined training. Shadow had once been a certified search and rescue dog used by emergency response teams during mountain incidents. An injury to his rear leg during a landslide ended his official service, and afterwards, the dog had latched onto Logan like they shared the same damaged piece inside. Shadow was loyal, intelligent, and always aware, circling the cabin each night before settling at Logan's feet. That evening, rain tapped rhythmically against the tin roof of the cabin as Logan repaired a broken lantern on the wooden table. The room smelled faintly of pine, engine oil, and old coffee. Shadow lay nearby, ears flicking at every odd sound outside. When a pair of headlights emerged through the fogged window, Shadow lifted his head and gave a low, warning rumble. Logan glanced up, frowning. Nobody came out here at this hour unless they were lost, or they meant something. The vehicle stopped, and seconds later came a knock. Firm, controlled, not panicked. Logan opened the door halfway, enough to show his guarded posture, but not enough to invite trouble. Standing on the porch was a woman in her early 40s, with short chestnut hair tucked neatly behind her ears. She wore a county-issued rain jacket, soaked at the shoulders, reflecting someone accustomed to long hours outdoors. Her name tag read, Sarah Pilson. Sarah had the kind of expression worn by civil servants in small towns, tired but kind, patient but unyielding when doing her job. Her face was angular, her skin pale from office lighting, and the way she held her clipboard suggested she liked things orderly. Logan could sense she wasn't the type to scare easily, but also not the type to seek conflict. "Mr. Logan Miller?" she asked, confirming it more than questioning it. "That's me," he answered, voice low. She offered a sealed manila envelope. "I'm with the La Plata County Probate Office. I've been trying to reach you for a week. Your phone doesn't seem to be active." "I don't use a phone." A flicker of curiosity crossed her face, but she didn't comment. "This concerns a family matter. I'm required to deliver it in person." Shadow approached the doorway, sniffing at Sarah's boots. She stiffened slightly, clearly not used to large working dogs, but didn't step back. Logan glanced at Shadow, who gave no sign of threat, only interest. Logan finally took the envelope. It was heavier than expected. Sarah continued, "It concerns the passing of your aunt, Ms. Helen Carter." Logan's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Helen Carter, the name carried dust, distance, and something unresolved. He hadn't seen her since he was 12, back when he still lived in New Mexico, and Helen occasionally visited with old books, strange maps, and herbal remedies his mother never let him try. She was tall, thin, with long gray hair tied in a loose braid, and always had a look like she knew something everyone else refused to see. Logan remembered her as eccentric but gentle, a woman who talked more about mountains than people. "She passed away last winter," Sarah said softly. "No known children, no spouse, no siblings alive. You're the closest blood relative." Logan nodded slowly. "I didn't know." "I'm sorry," Sarah added, and there was genuine sympathy in her tone. Then she straightened, shifting back into official mode. "Inside the packet are details you'll need. Deed transfer, inventory notes, and a handwritten message she left specifically for you. If you have questions, the office is open Monday through Friday." He opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah was already stepping back into the rain. "Good night, Mr. Miller, and take care. Looks like you live a bit rough out here." When she left, Logan shut the door and stared at the envelope. Something about receiving anything from Helen felt wrong, like a puzzle piece he wasn't expecting to find again. Shadow nudged his leg, urging him to open it. Logan tore the seal. Inside was a packet of documents and a smaller envelope with his name in delicate handwriting he recognized instantly. Helen's handwriting. He opened the letter. The paper smelled faintly of old cedar. Helen had always kept cedar blocks in her trunks. The message was short. "If you're reading this, Logan, then I've gone. Don't believe what they've said about me all these years. There are things you need to see. Come to the house at sunset." Shadow suddenly barked, a sharp, focused sound, not at the room, but toward the window facing the mountains. He stared at the dark silhouette of the San Juan Range as if something called him. Logan felt the hairs on the back of his neck lift. He folded the letter with steady but uneasy hands. "Well, boy," he muttered, "looks like we're going back into the mountains." Shadow wagged his tail once, low and certain, as if he had been waiting for this decision long before the letter arrived. Logan reached the remote property just as the sun slipped behind the San Juan Range, turning the sky into a bruised palette of purples and deep gold. The dirt road leading to the house was uneven, dotted with stones and split roots from the surrounding pines. Shadow kept close to him, steps cautious, tail low but alert, reacting to every shift in the wind as if the land carried memories he recognized. The house stood alone in a clearing, framed by tall grass and wilted wildflowers. Logan expected decay, rot, and collapse, something that matched his fragmented childhood memories of Helen Carter's eccentric lifestyle. Instead, the structure was intact, almost unnervingly so. The siding was old but well-maintained, the windows coated with grime yet unbroken, and the porch, though creaky, still held its shape. But two modern padlocks on the front door caught Logan's attention immediately. They were industrial-grade, stainless steel, the type used on storage units or laboratory access doors. They looked a year old at most, far too new for a house left untouched for a decade. He tested the first lock and found it stiff, as if recently exposed to weather but not rusted. Shadow sniffed at the hinges, ears twitching uneasily. Logan used his multi-tool to pick the locks, something he hadn't done since deployment assignments required him to breach abandoned structures. The mechanism gave way with a reluctant click. He pushed the door open. Inside, dust floated lazily in the cold, musty air, illuminated by the dying light filtering through the windows. The place was small, but organized. Far more organized than he remembered Helen's cluttered habits. Immediately to the right was a compact laboratory space. A row of metal shelves held glass beakers, pipettes, vials, and sealed sample jars. A short table supported a rusted microscope, its lenses fogged from time. Beside it sat a stack of folders labeled with faded ink. Mine Site 12A, Restricted Zone 4C, Incident Records, Confidential. Pinned to the adjacent wall were maps, large, yellowed charts of the region. Logan stepped closer, scanning the markings. Red circles highlighted old military testing grounds, while thick X-shaped marks crossed out sectors of abandoned mining tunnels. Though Logan wasn't a geologist, even he could tell the annotations weren't random. Someone had spent years tracking something systematic, something hidden. Shadow nudged his leg, then padded ahead into the living room, sniffing at each corner. Logan followed and found a leather-bound journal on a workbench. The cover was cracked, softened by use. Inside, Helen's handwriting filled the pages. Sharp, angular strokes that betrayed urgency. One entry read, "We stumbled onto what they buried decades ago. History isn't lost. It's hidden, and some people will kill to keep it that way." Another, "The explosion wasn't an accident. They mined at night. No records, no witnesses except the dead." Logan felt a chill deeper than the mountain air. He remembered being a boy listening to Helen talk about dishonesty buried under government reports. Back then, adults dismissed her as paranoid. Now, looking at the well-documented evidence, he wondered how much she had seen before anyone silenced her. A sudden scratching sound came from the back hallway. Shadow stiffened, hackles rising. He rushed toward a wooden panel near the rear door, a panel that appeared to be part of the wall. But as Logan examined it, he noticed faint scrape marks along the edges. Something had been moved here, frequently. He pried the board loose. Beneath it was a metal hatch, almost flush with the floor. Shadow barked once, sharp, insistent. Logan pulled the hatch open. A ladder descended into darkness. The air rising from below was cold, metallic, tinged with the unmistakable sterile smell of preserved equipment. He flicked on his flashlight and climbed down with Shadow behind him. The underground room was concrete-lined, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes still functional after all these years. The space was small, but densely packed. A steel table stood in the center, and atop it rested a cylindrical radiation detector, an older model from the 1970s, the kind used to measure subterranean anomalies. Around it were several test tubes containing a faintly glowing blue mineral. The glow was subtle, like bioluminescent algae, but unmistakable. Logan picked one up carefully. The substance inside shimmered like crushed sapphire dust suspended in liquid. He'd never seen anything like it. Next to the samples lay a manila folder stamped Restricted Access, Federal Oversight Division. The date on the cover was from nearly 40 years ago, the exact time of the supposed mine explosion. He flipped through it. The documents were sparse, heavily redacted, but one line stood out. Unauthorized extraction detected. Cease operations immediately. Confiscate all material, no exceptions. Shadow suddenly growled at the far end of the room. Logan angled his flashlight and noticed disturbed dust patterns. Someone else had been here, and recently. Boot marks, small but deep, led to a secondary door at the back of the cellar. It was locked from the inside, a sign that Helen had tried to protect whatever was behind it, until the very end. Logan's jaw tightened. Whatever his aunt had discovered wasn't just old history. It was alive, active, and someone had tried damn hard to bury it. As the lights flickered overhead, Logan looked at Shadow. "We're not alone in this," he murmured. The dog pressed against him in silent affirmation. The answers Helen promised were here, buried under dust and secrets. And this was only the beginning. Night settled over the mountains with a weight heavier than the rain that swept across the clearing. The wind howled through the pine trees like a warning carried from deeper in the woods. Inside Helen's house, Logan finished cataloging the documents he found in the cellar when Shadow suddenly lifted his head. The dog's ears shot forward, fur bristling along his spine. Logan froze. Shadow only reacted this way when danger wasn't hypothetical, when it breathed. He stepped quietly toward the front window, brushing aside the dusty curtain. A man stood at the tree line, tall, completely still. Rain dripped from the brim of a dark hooded jacket that obscured most of his face. The stranger had a rigid stance, feet planted firmly in the mud, shoulders squared like someone trained to hold ground. Though the distance obscured details, Logan sensed discipline in the man's posture, a rigidness built from years of command or combat. What unsettled him most was the way the man simply stared at the house, unblinking, as if he already knew who was inside. Logan opened the front door, stepping into the cold drizzle. "Hey!" he called out, voice firm. The man didn't flinch. Logan took a step forward. Shadow stayed beside him, growling low from his chest. Logan's hand instinctively hovered near the pocket where his folding knife rested out of habit from his Marine days. A blink of lightning lit up the clearing, and in that instant, without a sound, the man vanished behind the thick trunk of a ponderosa pine. Logan blinked and scanned the tree line. Nothing. No footsteps. No retreat. It was as if the man had been carved from rain and disappeared into it. Logan returned cautiously to the porch and stopped. Right at the top step lay a single rifle shell casing, clean, polished, a calling card, a message as clear as a boot print on fresh snow. "I was here. I can return any time." Shadow sniffed it, whining with unease. Logan pocketed the casing and locked the house for the night, though the padlocks felt inadequate against the kind of threat he'd just witnessed. Sleep didn't come easy. The cabin settled in the wind, creaking like whispered movement. Shadow paced near the door, lying down only when exhaustion pulled him into brief dozes. Logan waited out the night with a rifle laid across his knees. Not out of paranoia, but discipline. Dawn offered no comfort, only clarity. He needed answers. The town of Silver Creek sat 20 minutes down the mountain. Logan arrived just as the local diner opened. Inside, he met the usual cast of rural regulars. Men in dusty work coats, women with tired faces from early shifts, and elderly locals who lived off memories and routine. He asked about Helen Carter, expecting confusion or shrugs. He received something worse: certainty. She was crazy, said a middle-aged waitress named Linda, who had copper hair tied in a frizzy bun. Her voice held no malice, just exhaustion. Always muttering about noises underground. A bearded man at the counter added, said people were following her, government types, mining spies. He chuckled, revealing yellowed teeth. Lady needed better medication. An old woman near the window shook her head. Sweetheart, but unstable. Talked to maps more than people. Logan felt a defensive anger flare inside him, the kind he used to feel when people spoke about fellow Marines who carried invisible wounds. Still, he listened. Their memories were consistent, too consistent, almost rehearsed. Finally, at the far corner, an elderly miner lifted his gaze. He looked to be in his late 70s, wiry and stooped from a life underground. His name was Arthur Briggs, which Logan learned only after the man motioned him closer. Arthur had deep-set gray eyes, sunken cheeks, and hands that trembled slightly from age or memory. His voice came out in a dry whisper. "What she told you wasn't wrong," Arthur said. "Folks call her crazy because it's easier than admitting what they ignored." Logan leaned forward. "What did she see?" Arthur swallowed, eyes darting toward the other patrons before he continued. "I worked the north tunnels long before they shut them down. Some nights, long after closing, I'd hear drilling. Steady. Deep. Not from our shafts. Machines we didn't own. When I asked my foreman, he told me I was imagining things. Next morning, entire sections of ground were boarded up. No explanation, no investigation, just silence." Shadow, resting at Logan's feet, lifted his head and stared at Arthur as if he understood the weight of the words. "She wasn't crazy," Arthur said. "She was scared. And scared people get labeled inconvenient." When Logan left the diner, the sun had risen, but the day felt colder. He drove back up the mountain. The moment he stepped out of the truck, Shadow began barking, moving toward the side of the house. Logan followed and saw the damage. One of the windows had been forced open. The frame was bent. The lock had been sawed halfway through before the intruder must have been interrupted by something. Maybe Shadow's arrival. Inside, documents were disturbed. A drawer left half open. Footprints on the dusty floor that didn't match Logan's boots. Someone had been inside the house searching for something. But what? The minerals? The maps? Helen's notes? Logan couldn't know yet. But one thing was clear. Whoever the man in the rain was, he hadn't come to frighten him. He'd come to warn him. Stay away. Logan exhaled slowly, tension coiling through his shoulders. "They don't want us digging," he muttered. Shadow pressed against his leg, ready for whatever came next. Logan looked around the house that once belonged to a woman dismissed as delusional, and realized she had been telling the truth. She hadn't been paranoid. She'd been hunted. And now, so was he. The next morning broke with a weak gray light barely piercing through the dense canopy of pines. The air held a cold, metallic taste, as if the forest itself sensed what Logan had discovered the night before. Shadow moved with unusual purpose, pacing circles near the back of the property where the trees grew thickest. Logan strapped his pack, checked his flashlight and side blade, then studied Helen's map again. The markings were chaotic at first glance, but Shadow seemed to understand them, as if guided by instinct or by the lingering scent of something hidden. Shadow led the way, pushing through overgrown brush and following an old deer trail that spiraled upward. Logan noticed subtle signs along the route: broken twigs, compressed soil, pieces of fabric snagged on branches, all recent. Whoever had intruded on Helen's property wasn't finished. The forest gradually shifted from soft earth to rocky ground, and after nearly 30 minutes of navigating narrow ridges, Shadow stopped. He stood before what looked like a collapsed hunter's blind, layers of branches and dried pine needles arranged intentionally. Logan crouched and peeled away the camouflage. Beneath it was a steel door half sunk into the ground. A new one. The hinges held no rust. The dirt around it had been disturbed within days. Logan tugged it open, and a rush of stale, cold air greeted them. A set of concrete steps descended into darkness. He signaled Shadow, and they moved silently downward. The tunnel was shockingly wide, reinforced with beams that looked recently installed. Floodlights bolted to the walls cast a harsh white light that buzzed faintly. This was not abandoned. This was active. Inside the chamber at the bottom, Logan saw something that made his stomach tighten. A towering drill stood in the center, sleek, angular, and powered by machinery that bore the unmistakable markings of modern industrial engineering. Next to it, tool carts filled with thermal cutters, seismic readers, and high-density power units were arranged neatly. These weren't relics of old miners. They belonged to professionals, people with funding and secrecy. Then he saw it. A large crate stamped with a bold blue emblem, Northwest Energy Corporation. The name alone was enough to send a cold jolt through him. Years ago, Logan had been contracted as private security for one of their outposts. The corporation was wealthy, influential, and notoriously opaque. He'd quit after witnessing questionable disposal practices on protected land. He remembered the man who oversaw the site, Brandon Hale, an operations manager in his mid-40s with a chiseled jawline, close-cropped blonde hair, and eyes like iced glass. Hale was driven by profit, dismissive of safety regulations, and infamous for telling workers, "Science only matters if it makes money." Logan wouldn't put it past him to orchestrate something like this. Logan pried open the crate. Inside, cushioned in foam, were dense, mineral slabs, each one faintly shimmering blue, identical to what he found in Helen's cellar, but refined, processed. An energy-dense ore, capable of absorbing and releasing massive electrical charge. This wasn't just valuable. This was the kind of discovery entire industries would kill to control. Shadow growled sharply. Logan spun around. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel. Not one set, multiple. He extinguished the nearest floodlight with a quick strike of his knife, plunging half the chamber into shadow. The men entered with tactical precision. They wore dark work jackets and dust masks, but Logan could still discern details. Bulkier builds, military-cut hair, boots polished despite the mud outside. One man, slightly ahead of the others, had a scar that stretched from his cheekbone to the corner of his mouth, giving him a permanent twisted half-smirk. His eyes were sharp, calculating. A man used to violence and unbothered by it. Shadow's growl deepened. The scarred man pointed. "There, grab him!" Logan moved first. Using the extinguished floodlight to his advantage, he shoved a rolling tool cart toward the men, knocking two off balance. Shadow lunged, launching himself at the nearest attacker, teeth sinking into the man's jacket sleeve and dragging him to the ground. Logan sprinted for the far exit corridor, grabbing a sealed sample vial and yanking free a surveillance hard drive connected to a monitoring terminal. "Go, Shadow!" Logan barked. The dog followed instantly. Bullets sparked against the concrete walls behind them, ricocheting in chaotic bursts. Logan kept low, maneuvering through the dim hallways with memory-honed reflexes. The tunnel finally opened into a narrow vent shaft that sloped upward. Logan and Shadow scrambled through it, emerging onto a rocky hill behind a cluster of boulders. The forest was silent for a moment, until a rifle shot cracked through the trees. A bullet struck a tree trunk inches from Logan's head. He ducked, rolling downhill and using the natural terrain for cover. Shadow charged ahead, barking aggressively. A second shot fired, closer this time, but Shadow suddenly veered off the path, tackling something hidden in the underbrush. Logan glimpsed a rifle tumbling out of a sniper's hands as Shadow knocked the man backward. Logan seized the opening and escaped into a thicket of aspen trees. His lungs burned, his muscles trembled, but he didn't stop. Not until the forest swallowed all sound except his own breathing. Only then did the truth settle cold in his chest. Helen hadn't died of natural causes. She had been silenced, and he was next on their list. Logan made it back to Helen's cabin just before dawn, soaked with sweat and mud, Shadow limping slightly but alert. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that their escape had shifted something in the mountain's long-buried balance. Logan secured the doors, checked the windows for tampering, and laid out the sample vial and surveillance hard drive on Helen's desk. The glowing mineral pulsed faintly even in daylight, like a heartbeat trapped in stone. Logan knew they couldn't stay on the mountain long, not with armed men patrolling the woods. He needed outside help, someone he could trust. The only person who came to mind was Dr. Marcus Hale, a retired military scientist he had worked with during his service years. Marcus was a man in his late 50s, African-American, tall and heavy-set, with a shaved head and a trimmed salt and pepper beard. Despite his size, there was a gentleness in the way he moved, as though he was always conscious of the space he took up. Marcus had once overseen energy research for the Defense Department, until a scandal, manufactured by corporate interests, forced him into early retirement. That injustice carved deep lines into his face, but it also made him fiercely loyal to the truth. Logan drove 3 hours to Marcus's remote workshop near Cortez, a converted barn filled with outdated laboratory equipment, camping tools, and crates of declassified military documents the government no longer bothered to hide. Marcus greeted Logan with a mixture of surprise and concern. "You only show up unannounced when something's on fire," he said, his deep voice carrying both humor and worry. Shadow trotted in behind Logan, tail low but wagging slightly, and Marcus leaned down to scratch him behind the ears. "And if Shadow's with you, I'm guessing it's not a metaphor." Logan placed the glowing vial on Marcus's steel workbench. The scientist's expression shifted instantly from casual to razor-sharp focus. He adjusted his glasses, a thick, rectangular pair that made him look perpetually lost in thought, and held the vial up to a lamp. "Where did you find this?" he asked, voice lowered to a near whisper. "A tunnel," Logan said. "One that shouldn't exist, and a company that doesn't want anyone knowing it does." Marcus ran a series of tests with aged but functional instruments. He handled the mineral with extreme caution, as though it were alive. After 20 minutes, he looked up, stunned. "This structure, Logan, I've never seen a compound like this. It's a hybrid mineral lattice that conducts energy at densities we've only theorized. If stabilized, this stuff could replace entire power grids. Billions, maybe trillions in future markets. He paused, jaw tightening. And if mishandled, it could contaminate groundwater for miles. Logan set the surveillance hard drive on the table. There's more. Footage from inside the mine, and armed men chasing us. Marcus's eyes darkened. Then this is bigger than corporate greed. With Marcus's written analysis, chemical scans, and the digital logs retrieved from the hard drive, Logan had enough evidence to approach federal authorities. But he knew that walking into a police station wouldn't cut it. Local law enforcement often bowed to corporate influence. He needed someone outside the county, someone the corporation couldn't easily sway. He found her in Denver, Lydia Rourke, a federal attorney known for exposing environmental crimes. Lydia was in her mid-30s, Irish-American, with sharp cheekbones, auburn hair tied into a tight knot, and brown eyes that assessed people before they spoke. She had a reputation for being relentless, some said obsessive, after losing her father, a park ranger, to toxic exposure from an illegal dumping operation decades earlier. That personal tragedy gave her a righteous fury masked behind a calm, clinical demeanor. When Logan and Marcus presented the evidence, Lydia's expression shifted from skepticism to fierce conviction. "This isn't just a violation," she said. "This is decades of fraud, environmental poisoning, and possibly murder." She filed an emergency report. Within 48 hours, the FBI Environmental Crimes Unit arrived on the mountain, led by Agent Roswell, broad-shouldered, grizzled, with a trimmed white beard and the weary look of a man who'd seen too many cover-ups. The agents raided the hidden tunnel, seized the machinery, and arrested multiple Northwest Energy executives, including Brandon Hale. For the first time in years, the mountain was silent, not because someone silenced it, but because the drilling finally stopped. Weeks later, Logan began repairing Helen's cabin. He replaced the rotted boards, reinforced the roof beams, and restored her underground workspace, turning part of it into a small support center for veterans dealing with trauma. Free of charge, Shadow watched from the porch, basking in warm sunlight, calmer than Logan had seen him in years. As evening fell over the ridges, Logan stood on the restored porch. The pines rustled gently. The air carried the clean scent of soil, rain, and freedom. He whispered into the mountain breeze, "You were right, Helen. You weren't crazy. You were alone against a world built on lies." Shadow nudged his hand softly, grounding him to the present. Logan looked at the home he'd rebuilt, a place he never expected to belong to. For the first time since leaving the Marines, he felt anchored, rooted. The mountain had finally given him not just answers, but purpose. This was home. His, Helen's, Shadow's, and now, protected by the truth. Sometimes the truths we refuse to believe are the very truths God has been whispering to us all along. Logan didn't just uncover a hidden mine or expose a powerful corporation. He rediscovered something far greater: faith. The kind of faith that survives war, loneliness, betrayal, and years of silence. Faith that reminds us that even when we feel abandoned, God never leaves our side. In the darkest forest, in the coldest night, in the moments when fear threatens to swallow us whole, God still lights the path. Sometimes through a sign we overlook. Sometimes through the memory of someone we've lost. Sometimes through a loyal dog who refuses to give up on us. And sometimes through the courage to confront the very thing we once ran away from. Helen's truth didn't die with her. It lived on because Logan chose to listen. And it reminds all of us, every one of us has a Helen in our lives. A person whose warnings, love, or wisdom didn't make sense at the time, but whose words return to us when we need them the most. Just like Logan, we too walk through seasons where we feel unheard or unseen. We face battles that others dismiss. We carry burdens that no one else knows. But even then, God is working quietly, faithfully, arranging moments, people, and protection around us long before we notice. What looks like coincidence is often God's hand. What feels like silence is often God teaching us to listen. And if you're watching this right now, I want to speak directly to you. May God bless you and your family. May He guide your steps, strengthen your spirit, and protect your home. May He give you clarity in confusion, courage in hardship, and peace in the storms you face. Just like He guided Logan, may He guide you to the truth meant for your life. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need encouragement today. Leave a comment so we can pray for you and your loved ones. And don't forget to subscribe for more healing stories. Stories that remind us we are never walking alone. Thank you for watching until the end. May God bless you, today, tomorrow, and always.